When the ice sarcophagus finally split open in the Petropavlovsky-Kamchatsky lab, a woman who had lain frozen for 8 centuries slowly opened her eyes, and 3 people fainted. This happened on April 14, 1998, but the real story began a month earlier out in the snowy wastelands of the Tolbachik Valley, where volcanic earth breathes sulfur and the glaciers remember what people have long forgotten. A team of geologists surveying old lava tunnels for rare minerals stumbled onto a crack. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a strangely shaped cavity 9 meters deep under ancient ice which, by all estimates, hadn't melted for at least 800 years. When the drill broke through the last half-meter, cold air rushed out, carrying a scent of stone and something else no one could name. Later, one of the drillers, Sergei Kovalyov, would say, "It was like a grave exhaled." 2 days later, an archaeological team led by Dr. Rodion Kamensky, an expert in ancient Kamchatka cultures, arrived. Kamensky went in first. His flashlight beam found an ice block in the center of the cave, and he froze. Inside, clear, crystal-like ice, lay a woman, her face perfectly preserved, eyes closed, hands folded on her chest, dressed in furs and leathers embroidered with intricate patterns. She looked as if she had fallen asleep just yesterday.
Kamensky later described it, "I've seen hundreds of ancient burials, but this was different. The skin kept its color, the hair its structure, even the tiny wrinkles at the corners of her eyes were untouched by time." The cave's temperature hovered at -22 degrees Celsius. The ice around the body wasn't ordinary, it had formed from volcanic spring water rich in minerals. Preliminary analysis showed high silicon and rare salts. This created a natural cryoconservation effect. Radiocarbon dating dated the burial to roughly 1180–1210 AD, about 800 years ago. The woman had been about 35 when she died. Her clothing was ceremonial, decorated with bone pendants shaped like ravens and bears, symbols of shamanic power among Kamchatka peoples. Spiral tattoos, 3-ray designs from a central point, could be seen around her wrists. Kamensky photographed the patterns and sent the film to a colleague at the Ethnography Institute in Moscow. A week later, a fax arrived. "Looks like the sign of the clan's keepers, those who remembered and shared the tribe's history by word of mouth from generation to generation."
They decided to move the body to a lab without breaking the ice. A Mi-8 helicopter flew the find to a secure research center on the outskirts of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. There, the sarcophagus was placed in a sealed cold room monitored by video. 4 cameras tracked the examination, the standard for such well-preserved discoveries. Kamensky carefully began chipping away the upper layer of ice. The room temperature dropped by 3 degrees in seconds, even though the climate system worked fine. One young anthropologist, Kirill Zuyev, nervously joked, "She doesn't want to be disturbed." No one laughed. When the final layer was gone, everyone saw her face up close for the first time. The skin was taut, almost transparent, with thin blue veins underneath. On her neck hung a carved ivory amulet, the pattern so fine you could only see the details with a magnifying glass.
Kamensky gently picked up the amulet and held it to the light. The carving showed 3 figures holding a spiral overhead, the same symbol as on her wrists. At the center of the spiral was a tiny hole, as if a precious stone had once been set there. He took several macro photos and returned the amulet. That night, at 11:47 p.m., camera 3 caught movement. At first it looked like a shifting shadow, but on review it was unmistakable. The mummy's eyelids twitched like an unconscious muscle spasm. The guard called Kamensky in the middle of the night. He rushed in, replayed the tape 6 times. "Residual processes," he said out loud, but his voice was uncertain. The ice melted. Tissues reacted to the pressure change. Still, deep down, he knew the temperature had returned to normal quickly, with no lasting spikes. The next morning, the lab was sealed, officially for sterile research.
Rumors spread among the staff. The night technician claimed he heard a low humming sound from the chamber, like a distant earthquake. Lab assistant Olga Smetanina said the instruments would switch on and off by themselves. Kaminsky gathered the team. "We are dealing with unprecedented preservation of biological material. Cold may have conserved not only the body, but also some residual nervous activity." It sounded logical, but no one looked convinced. 3 days later, Kaminsky got a call from Moscow. A dry male voice said, "Dr. Kaminsky, the find is now under the Ministry of Science. All materials will be taken for centralized study." He tried to object, but the line went dead. By nightfall, 2 army trucks and an unmarked black Volga appeared. Men in insulated suits silently moved the sarcophagus to a special thermal container. An hour later, they left, leaving behind a stamped document, "Object seized for the research of national importance." Kaminsky anticipated this. Valuable finds often went to Moscow, but this time felt different, too fast, too secretive. He had already copied all the video to VHS tapes and hidden them at home. That evening, while his wife slept, he rewatched the eyelid movement scene. He caught a detail he'd missed. At the moment the eyelids moved, the electromagnetic sensor in the corner spiked, an intense burst, like a surge from a powerful generator. Kaminsky called his old friend, Valery Grinenko, who worked at a geophysics station. Grinenko arrived the next day and studied the data. "Rodion, this isn't instrument error," he said quietly. "This kind of spike shows up before major volcanic eruptions or earthquakes. But here, it's coming from a single point, from inside the chamber." "You mean the body emitted energy?" Kaminsky asked. Grinenko shrugged. "I mean, something happened there. I just don't know what."
A week later, Kaminsky received a telegram. "Report to Moscow about the discovery. Plane ticket enclosed." At Vnukovo Airport, 2 people met him, a man in his 50s with military bearing and a woman in a strict suit. They introduced themselves only by first names, Pyotr Semyonovich and Vera Nikolaevna. They drove him to a closed research institute on the city's outskirts, a building with no signs and blank windows. In the basement level, in a lab flooded with cold fluorescent light, sat the container. Inside, her. But now the sarcophagus was surrounded by medical equipment, cardiac monitors, EEG machines, thermal cameras. Pyotr Semyonovich explained, "We continued observations. What you're about to see remains strictly confidential." On a monitor screen, a slow, wave-like line moved, faint, intermittent, but unmistakably resembling a heartbeat. Kaminsky's chest tightened. "This is impossible. She's been dead for 8 centuries. Vera Nikolaevna answered calmly. "We thought so too, until we detected tissue regeneration." One of the lab techs aimed a micro camera at the woman's face. The image appeared on a large monitor. Under her skin, barely visible, thin fibers moved, as if blood vessels were gradually filling. In the neck area, the thermal camera showed a faint but steady heat signature. Temperature -2 degrees Celsius. For a dead body stored at -20, that was absurd. Kaminsky stepped closer to the glass. "Did you do DNA analysis?" Vera Nikolaevna nodded. Results were contradictory. Part of the genetic material degraded, but another part is identical to modern humans with minor variations. We're probably looking at a representative of an isolated population. Suddenly, all the instruments flashed simultaneously.
The lab temperature dropped 5 degrees in 10 seconds. Fine cracks spread across the ice surface from the center. From beneath the sarcophagus came a cracking sound, ice settling under its own weight. Then, silence. And in that silence, a sound, quiet, raspy, like an exhale. Pyotr Semyonovich grabbed his radio. "Probably gas release from under the ice layer," one tech suggested, "pressure equalizing." But Kamensky wasn't listening. He stared at the woman's face and saw the eyelids slowly, impossibly smoothly, begin to rise.
The eyes were amber-colored, clear, with dark pupils that seemed, it appeared, to gradually dilate, reacting to the lights. Not cloudy, not glassy, as if alive. They seemed to glide across the lab, across people's faces, and settled on Kamensky. "It's a reflex," one tech whispered. "Post-mortem muscle contraction from temperature change." Another tech screamed and bolted for the door. Panic is contagious. Kamensky stood frozen, unable to look away. From the surveillance system's speakers came a soft crackle, then a sound like a whisper. "Where is the fire?" Vera Nikolaevna turned to the technician. "Is it recording?" The tech shook his head, pale. "Everything's off. Microphones aren't working." Pyotr Semyonovich nervously added, "Infrasound, volcanic activity can create low-frequency vibrations the brain interprets as voices." But Kamensky heard more than sound. He felt words inside his skull, like an echo. "You returned. You promised." The eyelids closed. The temperature instantly returned to normal. All instruments shut down as if someone cut the power. When the backup generator kicked in seconds later, a mark had appeared on the inside of the glass, blurry, but shaped like a handprint. Vera Nikolaevna examined it. Condensation. Temperature shifts create these patterns. But the shape was too clear, too anatomically precise. In his report, Kamensky wrote carefully, "Eye muscle activity detected. Probable cause, residual bioelectric impulses. Visual contact observed. Acoustic phenomenon of unclear origin, possibly infrasonic vibrations from volcanic activity transmitted through ice." Writing this was easier than admitting the truth. He didn't know what was happening. That evening, back at his hotel, Kamensky found an envelope in his hotel room's mailbox. No return address, no stamp. Inside, a black and white photograph. The same woman, the same ice sarcophagus, but the shot was taken on old Soviet film, judging by the grain and faded edges, at least 10 years ago. On the back, handwritten in shaky pen, "You're not the first. She's waiting. Don't wake her completely." Kamensky flipped the photo again. In the background, a figure in a white coat leaned over the sarcophagus. The face was blurry, but the silhouette, posture, even the tilt of the head, eerily familiar. He held the photo up to the mirror. The man in the picture looked like him, or someone who moved exactly like him.
The next morning, Kamensky excused himself from the institute, claiming illness, and went to the Russian State Library. In the archives section, he requested files on geological and archaeological expeditions to Kamchatka from 1980 to 1990. He sifted through folders for 3 hours. In the 1987 file, he found a mention, "Discovery of unknown origin near Kluchevskaya Sopka. Responsible, Professor Tikhon Belosov, Institute of Volcanology." Nothing after that. Case closed with a note, "Object lost during transport." Kamensky wrote down the name and kept searching. In the 1989 folder, he found an obituary. Professor T.I. Belosov died under unclear circumstances. Body found in laboratory. Official cause, cardiac arrest. Attached was a photograph, the very same one from the envelope. A chill ran down Kamensky's spine. The man in the photo, that was Belosov. But why did the silhouette look so much like him? He took photocopies and left the library. Outside, it was snowing, rare for April in Moscow. His pager buzzed. Message, Return to Institute urgently. Changes. When Kamensky arrived, the lab was cordoned off. 2 armed guards stood at the entrance, clearly not research staff. Pyotr Semyonovich met him at the door, face tense. "See for yourself." The air in the chamber felt different, thick, humid, smelling of ozone and something metallic. The sarcophagus was no longer transparent. Dense fog covered the ice, as if steam rose from within. On the thermal monitor, a clear image, the silhouette of a human body in yellow-red tones, core temperature +2 degrees Celsius. Vera Nikolaevna stood at the control panel. Since the last activation, regeneration processes began. We detected blood movement in the vessels, weak but constant. Kamensky approached the glass. Through the fog, he could see patterns on the ice surface, thin lines forming spirals, the same as the tattoos on her wrists. "This is impossible," he whispered. Pyotr Semyonovich smiled without humor. "We crossed the line of possible long ago, doctor. The question now is, what happens when the ice melts completely?" As if in answer, the instruments shrieked. Temperature plunged to -30 in seconds, and a cracking sound echoed, loud like a splitting cliff.
The ice cracked in half. The upper part of the sarcophagus slid sideways. When the fog cleared, everyone saw the body was no longer lying down. It was now in a half-sitting position, possibly shifted as the ice melted. The head tilted forward, hair covering the face, hands resting on the knees in an unnatural pose. Sensors were still attached to wrists and ankles. Everyone froze. Post-mortem rigor could have shifted during thawing, Pyotr Semyonovich suggested, but his voice trembled. Gravity changed the body position. Kamensky's heart pounded. Slowly, or was it a trick of the emergency lights? The woman's head lifted. Hair fell back, eyes open, same amber color, looking in his direction, or just frozen that way. The pupils seemed to glow. Light reflection? One of the guards instinctively raised his rifle. Pyotr Semyonovich shouted, "Hold! Don't fire at a scientific specimen!" The air became hard to breathe, pressure dropping. Everyone heard simultaneously, not with their ears, but inside, like a deep rumble in the skull. "Rodion, you're here again!" Kamensky staggered back. Vera Nikolaevna grabbed her head. "Infrasound! Critical level! Everyone evacuate!" But before anyone could move, the lights went out. When they came back on 30 seconds later, the chamber was empty. The body was gone. Only torn sensor wires remained, and wet spots on the floor.
"How is this possible?" someone screamed. Guards rushed to check the exits, all sealed, no alarms triggered. Security cameras showed only a flash of bright light when the power cut, then an empty chamber. Technical error, Vera Nikolaevna insisted. The recording could have been erased, but Kamensky knew no technical error could explain what he saw, heard, felt. His pager vibrated. Message from an unknown number. "Tolbachik, come alone or remain a madman." He looked at the screen, then at his colleagues, all in shock, some crying, some methodically checking instruments, trying to find a rational explanation. Kamensky realized if he told them about the message, they'd call him insane. Without saying a word to anyone, he left the institute. The hallways were empty, everyone evacuated after the incident. He caught a taxi to Kazansky station, bought a ticket on the next train to Khabarovsk, then a flight to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. 40 hours of travel, and the whole time those amber eyes haunted him. Real? Or a product of collective hallucination caused by infrasound and stress? When he reached Kamchatka, the cold deepened, clouds thickened overhead. He followed the old expedition route, finding familiar landmarks by memory. The cave entrance was open. Ice at the entrance had melted, as if warmth came from within. He switched on his flashlight and descended. Inside was quiet, only dripping water. In the cave's center, where the sarcophagus once stood, now only a puddle of meltwater. And on the wall, an inscription, scratched with something sharp. Memory does not die. It waits for those ready to remember.
Kamensky pulled out his dictaphone and pressed record. April 23, 1998. Dr. Rodion Kamensky, Tolbakik Valley, site of original discovery. Condition: mild dizziness, possible dehydration. Air temperature near 0, unusually warm for this time of year. His voice trembled. In the cave's depths, faint light flickered, phosphorescence from minerals, greenish, pulsing. He aimed his flashlight there. A figure. A woman stood in the shadows, barefoot, dressed in furs. Hair loose, face unclear in the dim light. Hallucination, he said aloud, trying to convince himself. Hypothermia, oxygen deprivation. But the figure moved, stepped forward into the flashlight beam. The face, the same as in the sarcophagus. Amber eyes, looking straight at him. "You came," a raspy voice, real, echoing off the cave walls. His legs gave out. "Who are you? What are you?" She slowly approached, movements smooth, but he saw bare feet leaving clear wet prints on the stone floor. So, not a ghost? "I am Aina, last keeper of memory for the clan of 3 fires. You were the one who watched over the fire in the earth's heart in another life. Or, so it seems, memory tangles after so many centuries." She extended her hand. On the palm, a barely visible scar in the shape of a spiral.
"Touch," she asked, "and you'll understand." Kamensky hesitated. Everything inside screamed, "This isn't real. You're dying of hypothermia. Your brain is creating images." But his hand reached forward on its own. He touched her palm. Cold burned his fingers, real, physical cold. Images flashed before his eyes, maybe memories, maybe hallucinations from hypoxia. A volcano erupts, lava flows down slopes, people in furs run from fire. He himself, but different, younger, long hair, stands at the crater's edge. Aina beside him, holding his hand. "Memory is stronger than the body," she says. The image trembles, blurs. A ritual burial. They lay her in ice, surround her with stones. He stands nearby, weeping, swears to return. The vision broke. Kamensky stood in the cave, breathing hard. His hand no longer touched anything. The woman had stepped back into shadow. On his wrist, a fresh burn in the shape of a spiral. Where did it come from? Infrasound can cause not only auditory, but tactile hallucinations, he whispered like a mantra. The burn could be from contact with a hot surface I didn't notice. Aina looked at him with sadness. "You still doubt? Good. Doubt protects the mind. But when the volcano wakes again, and it will wake in 9 years, you'll remember this night and understand that memory lives in stone and blood."
"What do you want from me?" Kamensky asked. Aina, or what seemed like Aina, gradually dissolved into darkness, becoming translucent. "Nothing. You already did what you were meant to. You awakened memory. Now it will live in you. Or perhaps your brain is just trying to process what you saw in the lab." Her voice grew quieter, receding deeper into the cave. "Go, live, remember, or forget and remain yourself. The choice was always yours." She vanished. Kamensky stood alone. He turned on the dictaphone with a shaking hand. "Object not found. Probable hypothesis. Hallucination due to volcanic gases, infrasound, and psychological stress. Possible dissociative identity disorder. Medical examination required." He left the cave. Dawn was breaking. Snow crunched underfoot, real, tangible. A rescue helicopter found him a day later, dehydrated, with signs of mild frostbite and a thermal burn on his wrist
in the shape of a spiral. "How did you get the burn?" the medic asked. "I don't remember," Kamensky answered honestly. The official report stated, "Temporary disorientation, exposure to volcanic gases, hallucinatory syndrome. The woman's body was never found, likely stolen by unknown persons during the power outage."
Kamensky returned to work 2 months later. He passed psychiatric evaluation, deemed healthy, attributed everything to stress. No one asked about that night in the cave. Officially, the discovery was closed as lost under unclear circumstances. But sometimes, at night, he woke from dreams where he stood at a volcano and heard a voice. Memory does not die. A dream or something else? And in 2007, when Tolbachik suddenly awakened, triggering a massive eruption exactly 9 years later, just as she predicted, Kamensky stood by his window watching the news on TV. The scar on his wrist pulsed faintly. Coincidence? Or does memory truly live in those ready to hear it? Everyone decides for themselves. Science gives one set of answers, but some questions remain beyond its reach. If the story made you think, write in the comments. Do you believe there are things science can't explain? Hit like if you want more stories on the edge of the real and unexplainable. Subscribe to the channel. Many more mysteries ahead where truth intertwines with the impossible.